The Maine Lighthouse Museum really came to be due to the efforts of one individual, and that would be Ken Black, known affectionately throughout the country as Mr. Lighthouse. Ken was a retired Coast Guard, served over 30 years in the Coast Guard, and one of the things before he retired that he was able to do significantly was be able to collect artifacts from around New England that represented our lighthouse heritage, a heritage that was quickly disappearing. And if it weren't for Ken's vision, I'll say, to be able to save a lot of these lenses and other types of artifacts, they most certainly would have been lost in many cases.
And of course here we have this beautiful portrait of Ken Black, the founder of this museum and its predecessor, the Shore Village Museum. And I first met Ken more than 20 years ago, and I'll tell you, I'm just so happy to see how this museum has developed, how it's progressed over the years. And I really feel like Ken's just keeping a very friendly eye on things here and making sure everybody's doing things right. I remember him so many years ago talking about how he hoped the museum would find a home on the waterfront eventually, because that's where it belonged, on the waterfront. And here we are right on the edge of Rockland Harbor. So I know that Ken was so pleased to see this happen.
The Shore Village Museum was founded approximately 30-some years ago, and really from there it just grew in size over time. Ken continued to collect. That was the one thing that was really neat. Ken didn't stop collecting. Once he acquired as many lenses and artifacts, people came to him with many other lighthouse keeper related items, and so his collection grew to a point where the old Shore Village Museum was crammed, literally, with all kinds of artifacts, and that was sort of its charm. People enjoyed it. I mean, it was just one thing on top of another. But what happened at some point then around 2004 was the building was owned by the city of Rockland, and Rockland wanted to get rid of the building and sell it. They did end up selling the building, and so this collection needed a new home. But the community realized what an importance this collection was to not only the community, but also to the state of Maine, and of course nationally. So they rallied together to find a new suitable location. Ken's dream was to have his museum on the waterfront. That finally was fulfilled here in 2005 when we opened here at One Park Drive, and he was just thrilled to death to see his museum on Rockland Harbor. It was great.
At the Maine Lighthouse Museum, I think a lot of people enter the museum expecting to come in and just see a bunch of lenses, and we get a variety of people who are very avid lighthouse enthusiasts and people who are just in the area and want to see a museum. Most people come out extraordinarily impressed with the fact that it is so much more than just a lighthouse museum. We talk about the Coast Guard here, we talk about what it was like to actually live at a lighthouse. It's a maritime museum. It's not just a lighthouse museum, and it's more than that even. It's an American history museum.
Here we have a lens from Baker's Island Lighthouse in Salem, Massachusetts, and you can see the beautiful ruby red glass panel on there. This lens used to rotate in the lighthouse, and as these red panels passed in front of the light source, it created a red flash. And as the bullseye panels here without the red panels passed in front of the light source, it created a white flash. So it was an alternating red and white flash. This lens was removed quite a few years ago. I believe it was well over 30 years ago from the lighthouse. And the story I heard is that the Coast Guard crew, when they removed it, they were actually overcome by mercury fumes, because this lens used to rotate on a mercury bed, as most of the old rotating lenses did. And the Coast Guard crew that was there to remove the lens had to be taken to a hospital by helicopter. They were okay, but they were actually overcome by the mercury fumes. Unfortunately, there used to be two of these beautiful red panels, and one of them was broken when the lens was transported. This lens right here is a beautiful third-order lens from Matinicus Rock Lighthouse. That's where Abby Burgess lived for many years with her husband. And you can see the bullseye panels, the lens rotated around a light source, and each one of those bullseye panels would create a flash as it passed in front of the source. You notice on all these old classical Fresnel lenses, the multiple prisms, the glass prisms, that basically focus the light into a very powerful horizontal beam, much, much more efficient than the older lighting systems before they came up with this Fresnel lens in the 1820s. Right here we have this incredible second-order Fresnel lens from Petit Manan Lighthouse, a bit farther up the Maine coast, a fairly isolated lighthouse, one of the tallest in Maine. And this is the largest lens in this museum. There is no first order lens in this museum because the ceiling isn't high enough for it. You wouldn't be able to get a first order lens in here. As you can see, you have these panels on the outside here. These outer panels actually revolved around the lens and created a more intense white flash as they passed in front of the light source. So it'd be a fixed white light with a more intense flash at certain intervals. So that's fairly unusual, very nicely preserved lens. Well, here in this corner of the Lighthouse Museum, we have an exhibit on the flying Santa to the lighthouses. This was a tradition that went back to 1929. It was actually started by this man right here, who was Captain William H. Winkapaw. He was from Maine. He was from Friendship, Maine, not too far from here. And back in 1929, he, as a way of showing appreciation to the tremendous and important work the lighthouse keepers were doing, he started flying in a small plane over the lighthouses every Christmas season, and he would actually drop presents out of the plane for the lighthouse keepers and their families. And it was so much appreciated by the keepers that he started doing that every year. He started expanding the flight, so he went to more and more lighthouses each year. And then in the mid-1930s, Edward Rowe Snow, who was a very popular historian of the New England coast, lived in Winthrop, Massachusetts, he became involved with the flights, and he ended up taking over the Flying Santa flights. Captain Winkapaw and Mr. Snow did the flights together some years, and eventually Edward Rowe Snow became the sole Flying Santa. Very sadly, Bill Winkapaw died in 1946. His plane actually plunged into Rockland Harbor, not far from where we are right now. And of course, after that, Edward Rowe Snow was the sole Flying Santa. Mr. Snow passed away in 1981, and the flights are still continued today, actually by a nonprofit group called the Friends of Flying Santa. And the flights are done by helicopter these days, and the helicopters actually land at the Coast Guard stations, and presents are handed out to children of Coast Guard families. So it's a wonderful tradition that goes back more than 75 years, and it's now continued as a really nice way of showing appreciation to these Coast Guard people who are working so hard on our behalf. Okay, here in this corner of the museum, we have some exhibits on the old U.S. Life-Saving Service, which eventually was absorbed into the Coast Guard. Down here on the floor is what's known as a Lyle gun. This was a gun that was used for firing a line to ships in distress. Its range was in the neighborhood of 600 yards, but they would usually use it for maybe a ship about 300 to 400 yards offshore. If a vessel was close enough, they would actually row out in their surf boats and help the people. But if they're a little farther out, if it was difficult to get to them in their surf boats, they would use the Lyle gun. They would fire a line to the vessel, and they would attach the line to the vessel, and then the survivors from the ship would ride this breeches buoy down the line safely to shore. They would actually climb into this breeches buoy here. Over here, you can see what's called a faking box. You see how the line is wrapped around there. That's the line to be fired from the Lyle gun. It was wound in this fashion, so when it was fired, it wouldn't tangle or knot, so it would come off very smoothly.
I think what appeals to me the most at this museum is that it is a very comprehensive museum. It has a huge collection, but it doesn't necessarily need to display every single piece of its collection. And it tells a very big story. It doesn't just tell the story of the lighthouse, it tells the story of the lighthouse keepers, it tells the story of women that were involved in the lighthouses.
Here we have this incredible quilt sewn by Connie Small. Connie Small was the wife of a lighthouse keeper named Elson Small, and they lived for just about 30 years at lighthouses on the Maine coast. And they ended their career at Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse in New Hampshire in the 1940s. This quilt was created by Connie when she lived at the St. Croix River Lighthouse on the border with Canada, way up in northern Maine, and she loved this lighthouse when she lived there. She said it was a little paradise. And I love the way these panels on the quilt represent different aspects of their life on the island. You see the cow right down here, and a Christmas tree that was actually chopped down for the White House one year when Roosevelt was president. The tree from their island actually was transported to the White House. And various other scenes. I know there's one of the chickens running across the grounds there, and I think somewhere on here there's a cat, I think it's down there, and the truck that they actually used to drive around on the island. So each one of these panels had special meaning for Connie, And I was lucky enough to get to know Connie in her last years. She passed away in 2005 at 103. She just had an amazing life and was a guiding light for many of us who love lighthouses.
My favorite exhibit in the museum is probably the Abby Burgess Grant exhibit, and part of that has to do with the fact that I'm very interested in women's history, and I'm very interested in strong women, and she was a very strong Maine woman. And I have a history in the state of Maine that goes back 200 years, and I've had relatives that knew her, and that's exciting to me. So I have a personal connection to her through my relatives, and there's just something exciting about that.
One of the things you can't miss when you're walking through and viewing the exhibits are these lighthouse models that we have at various spots within the exhibition hall. And probably the most favorite of all of the visitors that we have is the Portland Head model, Maine's oldest lighthouse. I know when we have educational tours, group tours, when we have school groups, especially school groups, they find the Portland Head model just absolutely fascinating. That model alone is a teaching tool. And actually, we end up finding we lose a lot of the children once they get to that model, because they look inside the windows, they see the lights flickering, they see all this, it's like a big dollhouse, and they see all the little furniture. So it gives us an opportunity to really kind of explain, yeah, families, children, they lived here at these lighthouses, and this, they kept the light, the keeper climbed the stairs. So that model alone allows children to walk away with an understanding of lighthouse life, maybe more so than any of the artifacts we could show them, depending on their age. So the models play a significant role in interpreting our lighthouse history for our youth.
I love the fact that you don't just see lamps and lenses and the foghorns. You get to see things like what are the types of dishes that the people who lived on these islands and in these lighthouses got to eat off of. You get to see those everyday objects that are very tangible to your average visitor and they can relate to. And I think that makes it a very special experience for anybody walking through the door.
We also have on display this wonderful Peapod boat. It's its own exhibit. And what a tool that is for basically conveying to people, if you were living on an island lighthouse, how did you get back and forth to land? Especially the days before motorized boats. You were paddling your way through, and a lot of times you were trying to effect a landing back to your island station or even a waterlogged light without the benefit of that any power other than what your oars were. So the families, whether they went to land to shore for supplies, or whether they wanted to get their mail, or even if sometimes just for even purposes of providing like fishing and things of that nature, the Peapod was an important part of any offshore light station. And it wasn't, we even hear stories where families tried to land there, and it wasn't that uncommon to have your supplies doused with seawater. Maybe on occasion that Peapod even turned over. It wasn't a sure thing to land at an island light station at any given time, so we don't think a lot about that. Today was a hardy group of individuals. Today we think about the safety aspect, but these people accepted this is the way life was. You get back and forth from shore to your island station this way, and they were actually very pleased to have that boat. And he took care of it because they knew it was government property, and if they abused that boat, they weren't going to get another one.
The Coast Guard started modernizing. They were disposing of this material. They were actually dumping some things into the ocean, and it was so luckily that Ken Black started collecting this material back in the 70s, because it would all be gone by now.
Lighthouses, like everything else, have changed through the years. The technologies have actually, in a sense, made lighthouses better through the years, but they also put lighthouse keepers out of business, because slowly but surely, as technology advanced, the need for the keepers to be as vigilant ceased to exist over time. And what's neat here is we can tell a story with our exhibits here about lighting, for instance, from lighting and from a visual standpoint, and the audible warning from the foghorn fog bell standpoint, and show the different stages, that the evolutions that these technologies went through. Starting out with, we have a lot of the Fresnel lenses on exhibit, and how they started out with their illuminant being whale oil, moving then to an incandescent oil vapor, and eventually to electricity. And now even today we can show that technologies have continued to solar power and now light emitting diodes that we're able to show. So people see this fascinating array of 2 centuries of lighting, really as they learn. Same thing with the foghorn and the fog bells. We started out at lighthouses with a simple bell, hand rung, Then they went to striking mechanisms that would just, at intervals strike the fog bell, and then eventually to more of the electrical powered foghorns that could produce that sound without the cumbersome bells in place. And today now how the solar power is able to produce a fog signal sound. Actually today foghorns are really not that critical to navigation, especially for commercial shipping. But we're able to show that, but we're also able to show that lighthouses, though they have evolved over the years and they're not as needed or critical for aids to navigation, how their roles are transitioning, how its utility as a guiding light is now being basically transitioned to a guiding light for our heritage, a guiding light to our future. And why do we love these lighthouses, and why is it important that we act now to preserve them for future generations? So their roles are changing, but our love of them hasn't changed a bit. We love them as much today as people loved them a century ago. And I think that's the one common bond, is that these towers, for whatever reason, draw people to them for a variety of reasons. But it's really a great story worth preserving.
Eat your heart out, Martha Stewart. Happy New Year 2003.